to episode 2 of the Life in Norway show. This is the podcast of the Life in Norway blog, where we tell the stories of what it's really like to live in Scandinavia. Is Norway really the happiest place on earth? It's questions like this that I hope to answer as I interview other expats who live and work here in Norway. Thanks to everyone for all the great feedback on the first episode, the interview with Lorelou from the Frog in the Fjord blog. It's awesome to know that so many of you are listening and that so many of you enjoyed the show enough to get in touch and tell me so. For today's show, I'm joined by another expat blogger. This time it's Vanessa Bruna from the Snow in Tromsø blog. As you might guess from the name, Vanessa spent several years in Tromsø, but now calls Stavanger her home. We talk about all things Arctic, what it's like to live in the far north of Norway, and ultimately, why she chose to move on. If you've ever thought of planning a trip to northern Norway, or even considered living there, this is the episode for you. To get access to the show notes and subscribe to the Norway Weekly newsletter so you don't miss any future episodes, just head on over to lifeinnorway.net. But for now, happy listening. I'd like to welcome Vanessa Brune to the latest edition of the Life in Norway show. Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you so much.
We have actually met in person up in Tromsø. You were kind enough to meet me in a delightful little cafe, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. And you shared all the secrets of at the time, your home city, which I included many of in the Moon Norway guidebook. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But you're not in Tromsø anymore, which we'll come on to later. As I understand it, you spent 3 years living in the Norwegian Arctic, and you've since moved on to somewhere new. But first of all, perhaps you can tell us, you're from Germany originally. What brought you to Norway?
So, it's kind of a long story, but basically I have always been fascinated with Scandinavia. I've always seen myself living somewhere north one day. And when I finished my uni studies in Germany, I really wanted to do my master's in Scandinavia. I wasn't really quite sure where to do it and what to do. So one day I just stumbled upon the Northern Studies course at the University of Tromsø, and I was immediately hooked because the Arctic was so far away and so different from everything I've experienced at that point. And, growing up in rural Germany, the Arctic is basically the complete opposite. So I really wanted to go there, and I traveled there. I visited Tromsø. I definitely fell in love with the city, and I discovered a master's program that got my interest. So I decided to try it, and I moved there in 2014.
Fantastic. So it was actually a visit, first of all. You didn't just choose to move there off on a whim. You visited the Arctic, fell in love with Tromsø, found a master's program, and that's what brought you to the country.
Exactly.
What was the master's program?
It was Indigenous studies, so the study of Indigenous cultures, the Sami people in Norway, for example. I wrote my thesis about the Inuit in Greenland, so I got to go to Greenland thanks to the University in Tromsø, which was just super cool. So
Vanessa, with the blog, this outlet for your creative thoughts about Tromsø, was that something that led to your now career as a freelance writer and web content creator, or are the two entirely separate?
No, it did lead into a career, and I never really planned for it. I never really thought something like that could happen. When I was still studying, I had the blog on the side, and I was looking for a part-time job. And there was a position opening up at a company in Tromsø as a social media consultant. So I applied for it, and obviously with running the blog, I had a bit of experience with social media. So I got the job, and that just led to many more opportunities since then.
Awesome stuff. So let's talk about Tromsø for a moment. This is the topic of the show today. Now, I am also a fellow Tromsø fan. I love the city. Really interesting culture, really interesting architecture. The list goes on and on. But for someone who has never been to Norway, never been to the north, how would you describe Tromsø to them?
I would describe Tromsø as something really special. You can't really compare the city to any other city in Norway. You can't really compare it to Oslo or Bergen anyway, because Tromsø as an Arctic city is just, I mean, you have the city skyline and the snow-capped towering mountains all right next to each other. So from a landscape perspective, it's really special. But then again, you would expect a sleepy small town, but Tromsø really is the opposite. It's really lively. There's so much going on. There's so many events and festivals and so many sights to see, and there's really great nightlife too. So it's definitely a city that surprises you, I think, in a positive way.
Yeah, and that's something to also say that this has a very small population, Tromsø. This is a city of
70,000.
70,000. This is, in most other countries, we would call this a small town, maybe. And yet, as you say, there's this list of festivals longer than a city of 3-4 times its size. So while you were living in Tromsø, if a friend came to visit you, what would be the 2 or 3 must-see and must-do activities while they were with you?
2 or 3, that's really hard. Okay. Well, I mean, if we would talk summer, then I think a road trip to the neighboring island Kvaløya should definitely be on the list, because it's just a really special island in that it offers basically Norway in a nutshell. I mean, it has sandy beaches, it has towering mountains, it has ancient rock carvings and reindeers, lots of reindeers in the summer. It's really gorgeous. And if we would be there, then we would also go to Sommerøya, which is basically the last island before the Nordic Sea opens up. And it looks like a scene from the Caribbean. It doesn't look like a place in the Arctic. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it surprises many people that I speak to, certainly, that there are beaches in the north of Norway, certainly. So where else on your itinerary?
Definitely Fjellheisen, so the cable car. You wouldn't need to take the cable car. You can also hike up the mountain, which is really beautiful too. It takes around 1.5 or 2 hours, and it's a really gorgeous hike through the forest. And then once you're on top of the mountain, you have a gorgeous view on the city from above.
So I've taken the cable car several times. It's something I always love to do whenever I'm in Tromsø. I haven't hiked the trail yet. I thought about hiking down, but time was always of an essence when I was researching the guidebook, so I never really had the luxury of having a couple hours to do the walk. Is it a difficult walk?
Well, I mean, Norwegians will tell you that it's a really simple walk, and you see Norwegian children walking up and down, but obviously, if you're not used to hiking, it's definitely strenuous. It also depends on which season you're going. I mean, if you're going in June, then the trail will still be covered in snow and ice, which can be quite dangerous, of course. So, yeah. But, I mean, there are 3 different trails. The long one is definitely easier, but it's 4 kilometers just one way. And then there's also the stairs, which you can go up and down. There was a team of Nepalese Sherpas who did the trail with the stone stairs. And yeah, that one to go up is really easy, but to go down if there's snow and ice is really tricky. So yeah, I mean, it really comes down to your experience.
Sure. So that's 2 reasonably active activities so far. Anything else within the city itself, perhaps?
Well, I think I would go for food and drinks, definitely. So one of my favorite restaurants is Casa Inferno. They have the best pizzas in town, but it's not like a fast food restaurant. It's more like a really stylish restaurant. It has a steampunk theme to it. So that one's really cool. And then for drinks, I would go to the Edge Hotel, which is Tromsø's most luxurious hotel, but they have the Sky Bar on the rooftop, where you can get quite affordable cocktails. I mean, affordable for Norway.
Of course.
With the view of the city from above. So, yeah, that's really cool in the midnight sun season as well.
Excellent. So down in Oslo and even here in Trondheim, street food has finally come to Norway. I mean, here in Trondheim, every day on the market square, there's a couple of stalls at least. And certainly last time I was in Oslo, I was struck by how many there are these days. Has that whole street food trend come to the Arctic?
Not yet, I would say, but there is a food festival each year in September where you can get really cheap and really delicious Northern Norwegian cuisine. So that's something you should. Well, yeah, that's something to visit if you're planning a visit.
Sure. when it comes to food in the north, I think most people, whether they're in Norway or not, they probably assume fish is a large part of the diet. Is there anything savoury, sweet, meat or something else that's typical Tromsø cuisine?
Well, there's a really weird thing. Seagull eggs and beer, exactly that combination. I don't know how that originated, but they say it's a really traditional thing for Tromsø specifically.
How does that work? They're served together? Do you put the egg in the beer, or
No,
do
no, no.
you?
You just drink the beer while you're eating.
Okay, right.
Yeah. And then also king crabs and reindeer meat, of course.
Of course, yeah. Fantastic. You mentioned the food festival, and we talked earlier about the huge diary of cultural events that take place in the city during the year. Is there one festival in particular that you would recommend making a special journey up to Tromsø to attend?
Definitely, and that would be the Ridu Festival. That one is not in Tromsø itself, it's in the Lyngen Alps, so a 2-hour drive from Tromsø. But it basically is an Indigenous music and culture festival. So there are a lot of Sami artists, a lot of Inuit artists, North American native artists performing, and you can learn a lot about the local culture there as well.
Great stuff. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll be asking Vanessa, if she loves Tromsø so much, why is she now living somewhere else? This episode of the Life in Norway show is proudly sponsored by the Moon Norway Guidebook. Whether you're hoping to see the famed Northern Lights, explore Norway's fjords, or visit its beautiful and historical cities, Moon Norway has activities for every traveller. With itineraries like The Best of Norway by Rail and Norway for Families, expertly crafted maps, gorgeous photos, and trustworthy advice from yours truly, Moon Norway provides the tools for planning your perfect trip. Get your copy now from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or your local bookstore. And now, back to the show. And we're back with Vanessa Bruna here on the Life in Norway show. Vanessa, you have just left Tromsø. I think that was certainly a surprise to me. I've been reading your blog post after having met you and heard you describe the city and how much you love living there, and reading the same over the next couple of years. I was very surprised to hear that you decided to move. So despite everything we've talked about so far, I assume there must be some negative sides to life in the Norwegian Arctic.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, everything is kind of subjective as well. But for me, the biggest downside was polar night. So in Tromsø, between late November and late January, the sun doesn't go above the horizon. So we have 2 months of darkness there. And when I first moved there, I definitely underestimated what effect it can have on you. And I definitely struggled with winter depression for the 3 winters that I spent there.
Wow. So when you say winter depression, I mean, is it the light? Is it the weather, the temperature? What's actually causing that?
It's not the temperature, because Tromsø really isn't that cold, thanks to the Gulf Stream. But it's definitely the lack of light. I mean, you only have a sort of twilight between 10 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, but you never have any sunlight. And yeah, it just can really get to you, especially if you're at work in, a dark office all day long, and you can't really go out and enjoy the little bit of light that there is.
I think this must be something that, I mean, it's such an attractive prospect to visit Tromsø during this time. So many people visit for the Northern Lights, for example, and there's a certain novelty to standing in the city centre at 2:30 in the afternoon and it being pretty much pitch black. But to then have that day after day after day after day, that must be when it really starts to take over. I mean, I can only imagine that it gets obviously dark here in Trondheim, but not to the same extent as it does further north. Do you have any tips or advice for someone who's planning an extended stay in Tromsø about how to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things you can try. One thing is to drink fish oil, which is really rich in D3 and vitamin D, or you can try light therapy. But the one thing that really helped me was just to, whenever I get the chance, go outside and soak up the little daylight that there is.
So would it be fair to say that during December there's a period of maybe 1 hour when all the Norwegians are out on the street in Tromsø kind of soaking up that sunlight?
Yeah, the thing is that Norwegians don't really care. I mean, most of those who grew up with polar night, they don't really care. It doesn't really have an effect on them. I mean, my boyfriend is Norwegian, and he says that he couldn't really understand why I would struggle so much with polar night, because for him it's so normal.
That's really interesting. Was there anything else about living in the city that led you to decide to leave?
Yeah, so one other reason was the housing market, which is quite tough and expensive in Tromsø. They say that Tromsø now is the second most expensive place in Norway when it comes to housing. So it comes before Stavanger now, which was once the oil capital and the richest city in Norway. So yeah, I mean, as a student and then as a newly graduate, it was really difficult to find affordable housing.
I had no idea it was so expensive to live up in Tromsø. I would have assumed it was cheaper. Certainly, I know the rural areas in the north are very cheap places, at least to buy property. Supermarkets I found in the north tend to be a little higher priced than they are this far south. Anything else about Tromsø that people really need to know if they're considering moving there?
Well, I mean, it's a quite isolated place. You're halfway between, the North Cape and the Lofoten Islands, and there just isn't really that much to see around of the city. There are no other cities where you can go to, like for a weekend trip or something. So if you're into, traveling and exploring each weekend, then either you need to calculate flight tickets to Oslo, or you really need to get a car to drive around.
Interesting stuff. So, Stavanger is your new home.
Yeah.
What took you both to Stavanger?
So I really wanted to move to southern Norway. One thing is that they don't have polar night there, and the other thing is that I've never really explored southern Norway except for Oslo. So the whole west coast of Norway was completely new to me, and I really wanted to explore this region. And my boyfriend got a study place at the university here in Stavanger, which is great because the housing market in Stavanger for the moment is much cheaper than the housing market in Tromsø.
So you'll be buying?
No, not anytime soon. But we rented a place that is not a basement flat, which I'm really glad for because in Tromsø most of the flats that are affordable are basement flats. So yeah, we found a really nice place here with a balcony. Close to a lot of hiking trails as well, so I'm pretty happy.
Am I right in thinking that your heart is still in the north? And the reason I ask that question is we're recording this interview on video so we can see one another. And just behind your head there, I see a big poster of Tromsø.
Yeah, definitely. I love the Arctic, and it's a shame that I can't live there, that I can't really deal with the hard winters there, but I definitely will continue visiting because it's just an incredibly beautiful place, and I will definitely continue blogging about the Arctic as well.
Good, I'm really really glad to hear that. So Stavanger, the new home, what are your first impressions?
It's a lovely city. I mean, now during the summer it was full of tourists, so I'm looking forward to that settling down. So. That the city gets a bit calmer again. But so far, I think it's really similar to Tromsø when it comes to nature and easy access to hiking trails. Obviously, the weather is a bit better. The sun seems to come out a bit more often. And yeah, we'll just see how it is in December.
You're fluent in Norwegian, and I assume you spoke Norwegian with a northern accent. Have you lost that northern accent yet? And do you think you'll start speaking like the folks in Stavanger do, which, for those people who don't know, is quite a unique sound?
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I understand that because I had a colleague in Tromsø that's from the region, but my boyfriend struggles. He is from the north, and he really struggles to understand people. But I don't think that I will adapt to the dialect because I'm obviously still used to the northern dialect by speaking with my boyfriend at home. So yeah, I don't think I will adapt to that dialect, and yeah.
So what's next for the blog? You're not planning on changing the title, Snow in Tromsø, I assume, but you'll be writing now about Stavanger or something else?
Yeah, I mean, the blog name was really unfortunate. I don't think I thought that through. But then again, I started it 3 years ago, and I didn't know how far it would lead me then. I didn't know anything about blogging. So no, I mean, the focus of the blog is still on the Arctic and the Nordics in general. What I like to write most about is exploring hidden gems and gems in Norway and the Nordics that aren't that popular yet. And I'm quite certain that I will find those gems here in the Stavanger area as well.
Great stuff. I mean, I'm an avid reader of the blog, and I know from following you on Facebook and Twitter that you have many, many more fans as well. What kind of posts and articles tend to do best for you? And is there one in particular that stands out, either because it's been the most popular or the one that you most enjoyed writing?
Well, the ones that stick out are definitely those that have travel advice and information. So I have one post that is called Visiting Northern Norway, How to Get Around, which is really popular because people are actually searching for information on how to visit the Arctic and what they can do there. And yeah, so basically all those travel advice posts, which I have quite a few of. And also I recently wrote a guidebook to specifically Tromsø. That you can get on the blog as well.
Fantastic. And you've also written several articles about Tromsø and the Arctic for Life in Norway. They've done terrifically well. The images you take also are really quite powerful. Is photography a particular interest of yours?
Definitely, yeah. And I'm really glad to have bought a DSLR about a year ago now. It's kind of my little baby. I mean, I really love to go out and photograph the Norwegian nature.
I'm really looking forward to seeing pictures from Stavanger and the region around there. So we're coming to a close. I've got a few questions which I ask all guests on the Life in Norway show. So are you ready for these? Short answers if possible.
Okay.
What's the best thing about living in Norway?
The nature and just, those incredible landscapes that you can find everywhere.
That's in Tromsø and in Stavanger?
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Good stuff. What do you find most challenging about living here in Norway?
Can I say the food?
You can say whatever you like.
Well, the problem for me is I don't really like red meat and I don't like raw fish. So Norwegian cuisine is challenging for me.
So I'd like to dig in a little more detail onto this one. What do you end up eating? If you don't eat red meat and you don't eat raw fish here in Norway, the diet must be a real struggle for you.
Yeah, I don't think I will put on weight anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, the Norwegian cuisine is it's tricky for me. But then again, I'm trying. My boyfriend's family are Sami reindeer herders, so they always try to prepare the reindeer meat in a way that I would like it, like in lasagna, for example, which I do. So yeah, I think it's just a trial and error.
A reindeer lasagna. That's something that I haven't come across yet. No, I really want to try. It sounds like something homemade rather than that you would buy in a restaurant. Yeah. Final question, Vanessa. What's your favourite place? And I think I know what the answer is going to be in all of Norway.
Well, again, I guess I have to say Tromsø, but I mean, Norway is just full of amazing places. And one other place would be the Lofoten Islands. And they are basically Norway in a nutshell because they offer everything you could possibly want from a visit to Norway when it comes to northern lights and beaches and mountains and everything. But I also kind of fell in love with the region where my boyfriend is from, which is the Bodø area, because there are a lot of hidden gems there that aren't really touristy yet. And it's just a really nice region to explore with the car and just drive around. And it's also the region where I saw a moose for the very first time living in Norway. So, yeah.
So I'm going to ask another follow-on question now. So much for these being quick-fire answers. The Bodø region, I thoroughly enjoyed visiting there during my research for the guidebook, particularly Saltstrøm and the whirlpools just outside the city. And of course, you can get a ferry over to Lofoten fairly easily from Bodø. Is there something really specific about the city or the immediate surroundings that you would recommend?
Well, there's incredible street art in the city itself, and then there is Mjelle Beach, which is like a small secluded beach right next to towering mountains, which is incredibly beautiful as well.
Awesome stuff. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining me today here on the Life in Norway show.
Thank you for having me.
Where can people find out more information about you, your blog, and where do you hang out online?
Yeah, well, there's obviously the blog at snowintromsø.com, and then I am Snow in Tromsø on basically every social medium there is, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, everywhere.
And you're big on Pinterest as well, I noticed these last few weeks. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Vanessa, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You can find out more, including full show notes from today's podcast, at www.lifeinnorway.net.